Hello guys, so today we're going to take a look at Wessex low brass instruments. I'm going to share with you my opinion on Wessex Dolce, Wessex Festivo, and Wessex Travel euphoniums, as well as briefly review Wessex Bubbie 5 Travel Tuba. As usual, I'm going to discuss tone, accuracy, intonation, valves, design, and price of each instrument mentioned. So without any further ado, let's get going. I wanted to say a huge thank you for all the support I've been getting lately from all my viewers. I've been getting some nice feedback on my work, so just wanted to let you know that I really appreciate all the love and support you've been showing to me and my channel, guys. Thank you, and hopefully we can reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so keep it up, peeps. Anyway, the talk for today will be Wessex. It's a brand which has been receiving quite a bit of attention recently due to their unorthodox instrument design and customer-friendly prices. Before I move on to all the funky looking instruments, I'm going to talk a little bit about Wessex Dolce, which is somewhat of a standard design instrument model. Before we start talking about specific qualities of the instrument, I think it's worth mentioning that Wessex does not actually design this particular model. Dolce, alongside quite a few other popular cheap horns that are out in the market at the moment, is something that is called a stencil horn. Those who might not be aware of this particular term, stencil horn is a horn that is being produced by a separate manufacturer, in this case a Chinese company called Jianbao, then sold to a variety of companies around the world, where these companies simply put their brand logo on the instrument. Now, along the way, certain adjustments or procedures to those instruments might have been done, and I will discuss that a little bit more in depth in the upcoming videos, which is going to be the best cheap euphonium on the market. So more questions related to this particular topic will be answered soon. For now, let's stay on the track with Wessex Dolce. Today we're going to run things slightly different and start off by talking about the price of the instrument. I've mentioned prior that Wessex Dolce was the instrument I was impressed the most at DC Army Expo, alongside Adams E2 with heavy valve caps and Yamaha Neo. However, it was extremely impressive for slightly different reasons. Some of the well-known high-end horns have certain A+ type of feature. Now, Dolce might not have those type of crazy qualities, but everything about the instrument was a solid A. The catch here is the price. By the time I was testing the instrument, I was thinking, well, okay, a really nice horn, but I could definitely get some more edge on this aspect from a horn like a Besson, or more edge on that quality from a horn like Sterling, or some other horn on different qualities. Now, when I asked the guy working at the booth about the price, I was expecting somewhere around 4,000 or something like that, since I've tried many horns and I kind of had a good idea of what's going on with price ranges versus quality you get. Then the gentleman went, it's 1,200, and I was like, The listed price for Wessex EP100S, or in other words Dolce, stood at $1,225 US. This was my number one pick for get most for what you pay instrument candidate. It was a very well-rounded instrument with no real issues I could spot, while costing 6 to 9 times less than the horns, which are probably no more than 5 to 10% better. These so-called amateur horns have made a massive progress in terms of overall quality, to the point where I would literally struggle to be able to tell you why they're even called amateur horns anymore. Wessex Dolce is definitely one of the front runners for these types of revolutionarily cheap horns. So let's talk about specific qualities of the instrument. The tone quality of Wessex Dolce was really nice. Sound was warm and euphonium-ish. The sound didn't seem to break when playing louder, and even though it would be tough for me to say how good it would stand in terms of projection with some of the other heavier euphoniums, I did not notice any particular stuffiness or inconsistencies throughout the ranges. So Overall, Dolce gets my thumbs up for the tone quality. The accuracy and centering of the horn was really nice actually. It seems that more and more brands are switching their focus toward this particular aspect, since so many horns nowadays have a very similar pitching feel to it. Dolce is definitely falling to the same category, and it has a pretty good response time, nice upper register and open pedals. Maybe slight stuffiness on some of the low notes such as concert E-flat below the staff, but pretty much it's the same problem with vast majority of horns, so nothing that would prevent me from raising my thumbs up. In terms of intonation, Wessex Dolce seemed to be really good, with again the exception of concert E-flat and E below the staff. I know I say this in every video, but triggers do help. These are brass instruments we're talking about. It means not only the instrument will have intonation imperfections, but the player is likely to contribute either in a good or bad way to the general tuning due to physics of brass playing. There's no perfect tuning on euphonium, nor it will ever be, but Dolce definitely has what would be considered a good intonation set by euphonium market standards of today. So, thumbs up for sure here. Next in line are valves, and it felt smooth, quiet. Would be hard to comment on the durability aspect since it's vastly determined by the quality of valve guides. And unfortunately you only find that out once your valve guides break, or hopefully don't break. The valve tops seem to be slightly larger than original Jimbao version, so I assume that's one of the adjustments that Wessex did, and I had no problem with that either, so let's not spend too much time on this aspect and move on. Lastly, the design was really nice in terms of comfort. All the valves were easy to reach and the euphonium did not feel too heavy to hold on to. Didn't look as flashy as some of the other horns with pretty decorations, but that didn't really bother me much at all. The only thing I would have to say is that plating seemed to be slightly inconsistent and blurry in certain spots. I know that there are people using and touching the instrument throughout the day, but it seems slightly underworked, which again, not a big problem, at least to me, especially considering the price. However, it could be definitely improved in the future. All things taken into consideration, I would really have struggles recommending buying the expensive $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 euphoniums to vast majority of players. Instruments like Wessex Dolce would be a great fit for 90% of euphonium players out there. And me myself, I was playing with a worse horn than that up until third year of my undergrad studies. So I'm not trying to blow smoke to you guys. Don't waste your money unless you get a job which would require that little edge, or you're on the verge of getting a really good job. So otherwise you would be making a pretty poor investment. With that in mind, let's move on to the funky models of Wessex. Wessex Festivo was one of the more interesting euphoniums I've tried in recent years. From the looks, it seems like a hybrid between German marching baritone and euphonium. And I was told that Festivo was still a prototype, and I believe it's not on sale just yet. However, I had a chance to get a good idea of where they're heading with this model, and I think the best way to break it down would be by starting with the design. So apparently one of the main reasons for the shape of Wessex Festivo was to create less sharp angles of the pipes next to the valves in order to dramatically decrease the resistance factor, especially in the high register.
It comes out of this valve and in this shape.
Yeah.
Where it comes out of this valve, it immediately takes a sharp bend and then bends back. That's interesting.
At least from my standpoint, it seems that what Wessex is trying to do here is to create an instrument which would have the best of both marching and brass band worlds. In other words, maintain the tone standards of typical euphonium while fixing the projection problem. I have to admit that it was slightly uncomfortable for me to play. However, it wasn't because of the poor design. In fact, I think it's actually quite clever. I simply wasn't used to it, but that being said, it actually makes more sense than the standard euphonium design. Keeps your shoulders way more squared up and much lower, making it so much more natural to hold the instrument, rather than having extra 8 pounds on your left side while thinking about breathing and putting the mouthpiece on the right spot of your lips and etc. The valve placement was a bit awkward, but again, it actually makes more sense, at least on the paper, than a regular euphonium design. Festivo allows you to keep your wrist in a very natural position, whereas when you play a regular euphonium, the weird weight distribution makes it actually pretty complicated to get it right, since now you have to think about the angle of your elbow and your wrist and etc. And I know that the instrument kind of looks a little bit goofy in a way, but man, if you think about it, it actually makes all the sense in the world. I really believe that we'll hear much more about this model in the near future. And in conclusion, well, I'm not sure just yet whether I'm in favor of this new design or not, but it definitely got my attention. In terms of tone, Wessex Festivo definitely maintains a euphonium sound. It does not resemble much of baritone at all. And even though it might be just a touch brighter than some of the other euphonium models, it still has that darkness and warmth towards it. Now, the projection was the interesting one. I don't know whether it was because of the weird angle of a bell or pipes, or it was really projectile. Definitely more than any other regular euphonium, and at least from what I experienced. I'm trying to be cautious with what I say here just because I'm not as familiar with this horn, but I was actually pleasantly surprised by the sound features of Festivo, so definitely a thumbs up here. The accuracy was really good, but it was different than some of the other horns I've played. It didn't have the ease like, for example, Yamaha Neo did, but the sound was super open and resonant on the high notes. Again, I wish I had a whole day I could spend just by myself in a practice room so I could get used to the horn better, but it seemed to me that Festivo had a very nice balance between the back pressure and centering you get. In other words, not as resistant like Wilson, for example, but more pressure than Adams would be. Again, this will end up to being a matter of preference, but I kind of liked it, so... Talking about the intonation. Now, if somebody had a right to claim perfect intonation, Wessex Festivo would probably be at the top of the food chain here. Not only was really in tune within itself, but it was pretty hard to bend notes, which definitely gives way less room for error for the players to mess up tuning with their lips. Perfection does not exist, but Festivo was probably the most tuned instrument I played at the Army Band Expo, so guess what? I know that the valve positioning looked a little bit awkward, but what I want you to do now is to forget about the looks for a second. Valves were running smooth, quiet, and the valve tops were comfortable to place fingers on. If you play regular euphonium, yes, it will be uncomfortable in the beginning, but after I spent a couple of minutes playing on it, it was already starting to feel more comfy, and from the technical standpoint, for sure a thumbs up. Lastly, I was told that once the instrument will be out, it will roughly cost around $1,700 US. That is definitely on the low side of any low brass instrument. Is it worth buying? I don't know just yet. I guess we'll have to see what does the end product look like. I feel like this is going to be one of those hit or miss type of instruments. If it turns out to be as functional in practice as it sounds on paper, I think that Wessex might have an extremely great success with the horn. Otherwise, it'll end up being one of those instruments you have purely to mess around with. Either way, a huge thumbs up for the company for looking outside the box and trying to achieve different levels of quality and price. Let's move on to our dwarf euphonium fellow here. Wessex Travel Euphonium is another prototype model which is not officially out just yet. I'm not going to break it down in a very detailed manner since I believe it's pretty obvious that it's not designed for stage performances, but I still think it's worth talking about. No matter how cool and fun it looks, if I was really honest to myself, I would struggle seeing much of a purpose for this little fellow. And I know most of you probably think that the purpose is pretty obvious, which is traveling convenience and staying in shape while not having a regular euphonium on hand. However, it was extremely uncomfortable. I couldn't figure out a way to hold it or place my fingers on. It sounded obviously awkward, which is to be expected, and I bet if I was to spend more time on it, I could get more accustomed to it, but that's the whole point. You're not gonna spend much time on it since it's a last resort option. Apart from the mouthpiece, nothing felt like euphonium at all. That means you're not going to practice your fingers on it. Being controlled with it also is going to be pretty rough. Due to the tiny shape, it does not play like euphonium either, so why not just use mouthpiece for 20 minutes a day if you want to avoid muscle atrophy? Or even better, get a small baritone horn, which is going to be similar in size but much more functional and related to euphonium playing. I really don't want to sound negative here by any means, and especially since this tiny euphonium looked really cool, but I wouldn't personally use it to travel with. At least not in my particular circumstances. I could see where it would work with kids maybe, but for me it was just a little bit optimistic effort by Wessex. Again, just my opinion. Give it a go if you want it. You might like it and have different opinion. On top, it's not going to be all that expensive for what I was told, roughly around $1,700 once it's out. It's cool, but I would rather get a baritone horn if I wanted a small instrument to travel with. Just saying. Lastly, let's talk about Wessex Travel Tuba. Now, this is going to be based on the feedback I got from James Gourlay, who is a living tuba legend. And this was not from an official chat, so I'm pretty positive it is legit feedback. For those who don't know, James Gourlay is a conductor of the River City Brass Band, the band which I happen to be playing in. And when we tour for a longer period of time, he grabs his travel tuba, and I know that he really likes it. Obviously, it does not sound like tuba at all, but it is definitely a good alternative if you want to stay in shape. And I know that I just said I would not personally use a travel euphonium, but the tuba version is much beefier, and at least you have some space to put your fingers on and etc. It is roughly the size of a baritone horn. So if you travel that as a tuba player, why not just get a baritone if you're a euphonium player and your main concern is the size of the instrument on the road and flight? At least that makes more sense to me. Anyways, I know that the travel tuba is something that James uses on a regular basis, and I trust his feedback since he's got a massive traveling experience as a musician. I haven't played the travel tuba myself, but since some people inquired about it, I figured it might be interesting for you guys to know that at least a small bit knowledge that I have about it. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys. Hopefully you found this video informative and entertaining. Shout out to all the people who've been giving me feedback on my previous videos. It's been really useful, so thank you all. If you feel like you have something to add up or if you have any questions, make sure to leave a comment down below or comment on my Facebook and Twitter. Hit the like button and share with your friends if you enjoyed this video, and make sure to help me out with my 10,000 subscriber quest by subscribing to my YouTube channel. Again, thank you for your time watching. Stay safe, work hard, and keep motivated, peeps. Till the next time.